Morning.
Martin Luther King Jr. One of my heroes. One of my heroes because despite all odds, he maintained that a spiritual solution is a viable solution. And he held to spiritual principles no matter what was happening around him, and even sometimes within him. To focus on that power and to maintain that connection and making that viable truth, that essence, that power, that motivation that drove him and continued to drive all the people around him, and then eventually drove a nation to look at itself a little more honestly, to go a little more deeply into what it is we were doing and to make some changes. It's not easy to make changes. You know, life shows us these things that are going on, and they seem to be these mountains before us. And that's how Dr. King talked to the people, and he knew that there was a mountain before them, but he offered hope and he held to those beliefs so strongly, even to the point of saying that he climbed it, and he looked over, and he saw that promised land, and he knew that we would get there. And that's the secret. The secret behind the power of a spiritual solution. It's that knowingness. It's gone beyond belief into that place of knowing. And that's the place that we are all called to in our lives. That place of knowing, of being in the solution. Not talking about the solution, not even dreaming about it, but knowing it. Knowing it. When we hear that song, Imagine, we go to that knowing place. Don't you kind of do that? Anybody do that? Doesn't it become real in that moment? Isn't it one of those songs that really brings us into that place where we sit there and we go, yeah. Not, you may say, I'm not the only one. Like, you know, and even saying it in community like this, you know you're not the only one, right? You can answer. Yes. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Hallelujah. There we go. We got a believer. Some quotes. I'm going to throw out some quotes here from Martin Luther King. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless night of racism and war, that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I believe that an unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. Not one of the more famous quotes that we hear all the time, but extremely powerful. He refused to accept, despite everything that was happening in his life, the physicality of it, he went back into that spiritual place, again, of knowing, Beautiful. He said, the time is always right to do the right thing. The time is always right to do the right thing. We do the right thing, we do the non-violent thing, is what he talked about, that power of that spiritual solution, coming into the situation from a perspective of non-violence, not because I want something done differently, but because I know my beingness, it is the right thing. Me being in the right place, and me offering the right place to you, because I have the utmost belief that eventually you're going to get it. And not only that, but beyond that, to the fact that you have it. You have to hold in your heart the belief that someone else has the capacity to be in the right place and to do the right thing. That is one of the amazing gifts that we all have. And that's a hard thing to hold on to when someone else isn't doing the right thing. it's very, very difficult to hang on. And he says, it must be emphasized that nonviolent resistance is not a method for cowards. It does resist. If one uses this method because he is afraid or merely because he lacks the instrument of violence, he is not truly nonviolent. That is why Gandhi often said that if cowardice is the only alternative to violence, it's better to fight. So really challenging us. What's the belief behind it? What are you standing in? But how do we do it? How do we do it? You know, we hear these things and we hear about, you know, that our beliefs have to go to that place. But what's that secret of the power of the spiritual solution? Because if we know this, this peace, that sometimes I used to go around and say, what's the thing? Because I can get all the intellectual stuff, but how do I make the connections? Where do we put it all together? And I want to share with you a little insight I got. I love my little notes here. Actually, it's a quote. It's a quote from the Gnostic Gospels, from the Essenes. Now, the Essenes are the mystics. Traveling all around the world, you'll see their books. They'll end up in Tibet. They'll end up in Native American cultures. They'll end up in all the places. The Essenes are kind of around there. And now their books were unearthed in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And what happens in this Gnostic Gospels is that here in Book 3, the Book of Peace, there's a quote that I think really is one of the real secrets, the powers of us using this. And the quote says, 3 are the dwellings of the sons and daughters of men. These are thought, feeling, and body. When these 3 become as one, you will say to the mountain, mountain move, and the mountain will move. So each of us in our lives, we are in this place of being the 3 dwellings that we have. And the gospel here says that it's in thought, feeling, and body. And what I want to offer to you, something that is right here behind me, so it's sitting there, is this idea of the energy centers that we have right here in our chakras. And it is connecting these groupings of these energy centers that is now bringing the 3 dwelling places of ourselves together. And we have the lower chakras, which those lower 3 chakras are those really base survival chakras. They're filled with emotion. They're just spouting it out all over the place, pushing us, driving us, making us react. And then we have our top 2 chakras that are there with the intellect and full of thoughts and ideas. And we always say, you know, thoughts are things, but thoughts without that emotion, without that direction, it really isn't a thing. It's just a wish. It's kind of things out there all over the place. That's sort of why a lot of times in the idea of saying affirmations over and over and over again, they never really kind of solidified because they were kind of just, you know, out there. And when we take a thought and we take that emotion and we bring that together from that heart, from that mystic place in us, and we align the 3, we are in knowing.